Welcome to Warriors in Quiet Waters virtual fishing experience. In today's episode, we will learn top fly casting techniques from renowned instructor Bruce Richards. Bruce retired from Scientific Anglers in 2009 and is living, fishing, writing, and teaching in Bozeman and Ennis, Montana.
So what I like to do is just concentrate on the one thing that's really important, and that's the top leg of the loop. The bottom leg of the loop is just along for the ride. It's pulled tight between the rod tip and the front of the loop is getting pulled. What that looks like doesn't make any difference, so don't worry about where that is. The only thing that's really important is that the top leg of the loop be straight and aimed at the target. If you see a really straight top leg on that loop, I guarantee you it's going to go a long ways, it's going to work really well in the wind, and it's going to be much easier to be accurate with. Because if I throw this line and the top leg is quite straight and is pointed at the target, that line can go nowhere but there. But if the top leg is straight, they don't slow down. You'd think it's not like throwing a ball, where the minute you let go of the ball, or the minute a bullet leaves the rifle, that's as fast as it's ever going to go. It starts to slow down right there. If the top leg of the loop is straight, it doesn't slow down. In fact, it tries to accelerate initially. It gets really simple if you are purely looking at the top leg of the loop. If it isn't straight, there's something to fix. And if it isn't aimed at the target, there's something to fix. So the things that make the line straight, number one, the top leg of the loop is formed by the path that the rod tip makes during the casting stroke. So from here to here, if the rod tip path is straight, the top leg of the loop will be straight, which makes it pretty simple. If it isn't straight, that means that the rod tip path wasn't straight. It was either curved up, it was curved to the right, curved to the left, or curved down. Those are the only four options to it. So how do you get that straight tip path? It's two things. Number one, when we cast, we bend the rod a certain amount. If we didn't, it'd be really hard to keep it straight. If this rod didn't bend, and I rotated it from here to there, no matter what, the rod tip path is going to be up. But because it bends, I can keep it there, and then I unload it, and the rod tip path can be real straight. So matching the casting arc, which is the angle change during the cast, from here we go from here to here. Well, if I'm going to bend the rod that much during my cast, I can show you exactly what my casting arc needs to be. Rod tip stays at the same height. I go until it's straight. That's where I have to start applying the power. Comes through this end, stops, and that's where it has to stop. That tip path was straight, and that was the casting arc. It was about 60 degrees. So what happens now? I'm going to bend the rod a lot more. Now my arc is so the more you bend the rod, the wider the arc has to be. So if you use a really wide arc, but you're not bending the rod much, which is beginner city, you get this really wide casting arc, but not much rod bend, so the tip path is way up. So number one, you match the casting arc to the amount of rod bend. If you see a big upward curve, that means the tip path was big and upward, and it almost always is the case that is caused by the floppy wrist syndrome. So you just need to tell them, don't bend the wrist so much. And then if they start doing it again, you say, remember that wrist thing, don't bend it so much, you're bending too much. Simple language, and it really, really works fast. So number one, get the casting arc to match the rod bend. The more rod bend there is, the wider the casting arc has to be. And if your casting arc is too wide, it's a big upward curve. But the other thing that can happen is the dreaded tailing loop, and that's when the tip path dips down. If I come through this stroke, I get partway through, and then I pound the power real hard. I don't bend the rod much, don't bend it much, and I watch the rod dip. It dips down, comes through to there, and it goes back up, and you get tailing loops. And you all know what those look like. The leader comes down below. If you do it just right, you get that. The other thing is that the force needs to be applied in a real constant way, real smooth. Everybody says, oh, you got to do your casting stroke real smooth. But what does that mean? And what it is, I'm giving a little shot of power in the middle. If I get everything bending just the way I want, and then I give it a pop, what happens? The rod bends more, the rod tip goes down, it comes back up, and you get a tailing loop. So the force must be applied at the same rate from the beginning to the end. It can't be slow, and then pop, and that's really common. If I'm smooth all the way to the end, see the top leg of that loop stays nice and straight. The minute I give it a little extra shot, see the leader dip down? And it's right there. Just watch my hand. See that little pop? Right? That causes tailing loops. And the last thing that's really, really common, that you see all the time, is called creep. Everybody know what creep is? When I make my back stop, I'm waiting for the line to straighten. You have to wait until it's straight, of course. But if while I'm waiting, I get a little anxious, and I start to just kind of slide this thing forward. Now I've taken that perfect casting arc that was like that, and now I've narrowed it. I still have to bend the rod the same amount, but now my rod tip's way high up. What does it have to do? It has to bend, overbend, and dip and make a tailing loop. And this is what it looks like. Just watch the butt of the rod right here. Tailing loop. See, the minute I stopped back there, I started forward, right there. Tailing loop. I have no choice. I'm going to get a tailing loop. So this is the right way. See, the rod stays right there. Here's the creep. See it come forward? It's subtle, but it's easy to see if you look for it. So a real smooth acceleration, followed by a crisp stop. Stop should be like running your hand or running the rod into something. If the stop is slow, the rod continues to rotate and that opens up the loop. So anyway, if you're going to bend the rod a lot, the casting arc has to be wider. If you're not going to bend the rod very much, it has to be narrow. Apply the force real smoothly so the rod bends in a smooth way so you don't end up disrupting the bend and causing a tailing loop. Of course, the pause, but that's pretty obvious. If somebody's doing this, you all know, just tell them wait. You gotta wait longer. Whoa, got one. So those are really the key things. And when I teach, and I'm sure it's the same with Brant, when I teach, even with intermediate and more advanced casters, I probably spend 80% of my time on those things we just talked about. Oh, the one last thing. There's a process to use that makes this a lot easier. If you follow it, it's really easy. It's 6 simple steps. When you're looking at somebody's cast and you want to know what to do, the first thing you do, and it kind of is top to the bottom and then bottom to top. I got step 1, 2, 3. The first step is look at the fly line and figure out if it is doing what you want it to do. So look at the top leg of the loop and see what it is. If it is not straight and aimed at the target, then you know there's something wrong. So the next thing you do is you look at you follow the rod tip. Just get where you need to be to see it, and see what it's doing. If for example a caster's throwing a loop that's spinning way over to the side, see the tip path? It's out that way. That's going to throw the top leg of the loop out that way. And what's the last thing it has to do? It has to curve way over there. First thing, you look at the line. You figure out what you're trying to find. I say, okay, the top leg of the loop is a big upward curve. Now I'm going to watch the rod and see if I can figure out, what the rod is doing to cause that. And basically what it is. The tip path is like this. And the last thing you do is you take a real close look at the caster's arm, the butt of the rod. The answer can always be seen somewhere between here and here. The problem is always right in here. So you take a real close look. Really watch it close. And you'll see little things like creep. See it? Or no creep, but with a pop of power at the end. I'm waiting long enough. I'm still getting a tailing loop, which almost has to mean that I'm, applying the power abruptly. So that's step 1 is the line. Step 2 is the rod. Step 3 is the caster. Tell them what they're doing. Step 4 is just the reverse. I'm going to say, here's what I want you to do different with your hand. This is, don't do that thing at the end anymore. You've got to accelerate smooth all the way to the end, no pop. And then they do that, and then say that made the rod tip go much straighter. And now, wow, look at that look at that loop. Top leg is really straight. That's just what we want. That process works for almost every flaw. So what I like to do, if our casting direction is here, the first thing I would do is I said, I'd really like to have you facing 45 degrees. So if you're right-handed, my casting direction is there, I want to be facing this way. And that puts my shoulders like this, and it makes it really easy for me to watch my back cast. Because if you can't watch your back cast, it takes like 3 times longer to get good at this, because half the problems are back there, and if you don't look at it, you don't know. Grip, thumb on top, fingers on the bottom. Suitcase grip is the strongest and the easiest. Those are the 2 style-related things, and those are both style, but it makes it easier. So that's what I would do. And then as far as getting them going from there, I go straight to kinesthetics. So what I would do, before we haven't even talked about casting it. You're holding the grip, you're holding the right, you're standing right. I'm going to put my hand above the grip on the rod. No touching, there's no need for that. And I would say, okay, you feel what that feels like?
Yes.
Okay, you want to move the rod about that far, see where the rod is. Stop, stop, stop. There's a pause, 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 pause. I'm going to slide out of here. You're going to do it on your own, starting right now. But that going straight to the kinesthetic approach, if it's done right, is the fastest thing. I used to do a lot of demos at shows. You know, I'd talk about all this stuff and make some fancy casting and stuff, and who'd like to learn how to fly cast? And I would wait for a 13, 14-year-old boy or girl to put up their hand that looked kind of moderately athletic maybe. And we'd do this, and I'd just say, real quiet, turn the mic off and say, okay, Elizabeth, you do exactly this. And within a minute, they'd be throwing beautiful loops at 30 feet. Didn't understand a thing about it, but they easily could do it. Well, once they're throwing a reasonable loop, and I'm not talking perfect or long, but once they're fishable, you know, once it's good enough that you can actually go fishing, then I would say, okay, now here's how we actually have to fish. So you have to put the line in your other hand, and said when you cast, this hand kind of follows that hand. Because otherwise they're hauling, and then they're slipping, and they're hauling, they're slipping. So you just teach them how to use their hand. But you just do it this way. Just hold it just like this, and just kind of follow along. Let's go outside and do some real world stuff, and we can we'll run through the analysis thing a few times. The thing we didn't talk about inside, we're talking primarily dry fly fishing or small fly fishing anyway, not big heavy stuff. When you start throwing streamers and nymph rigs and stuff like that, it changes a bit. The basic physics are the same, but if I throw a loop with a real straight top leg and fairly fast, when that little tight loop is going real fast because they don't slow down because they're real efficient, there's not much wind resistance. When the fly hits the end, it's going really fast, and the first thing it does is it's going to kick straight down. You see it all the time. So when you're throwing heavier stuff, you actually want to open the loop a little bit. You see how that fly kind of slowly turns the corner? If I throw it real tight, you see how that fast that fly turns over and kicks even that light thing. If that was a tungsten beaded something or other, that thing would be buried in the ground. So what you want to do I'm just going to open my casting arc a bit. You see the top leg gets kind of rounded, but you see how slow that fly turns the corner as opposed to just banging right straight into the water. So when you start throwing bigger stuff, it turns into trouble. You get more tangles and all that. If you simply, notice my casting arc. Look at the yellow dot. Put a mark where it stops. That's what I do if I was throwing something light. If I'm going heavy, see where the dot is now? That widened that loop a little bit. It made it rounder so the fly doesn't kick so hard when it turns over. And if you really want to do it well, and especially if you got a wind on the bad side, you can do a Belgian cast, which actually brings it out to the side and then up and back. That kicks. When I finish this at the end, I'm going to kick the rod tip up, so my tip path is like that. That'll throw that heavy fly 15 feet in the air. Now I got the fly way above my head back here, and all I do is I just go straight forward and down. And it's totally safe. The fly never comes near the person casting or the guy. Of more importance. More importantly. So what has to happen, and you all do this instinctively, you never even think about it, but one of the reasons I like textured lines is because I can tell without looking if somebody's not doing it right. But if I move this hand just this much, I don't have an inch going through that rod. If I stop, haul, slip, haul, and it just takes the juice out of the front cast and it collapses a lot of the time. Because you have to add extra power in the front and back off in the back. But it's just, if they try to keep their hands together, this is really awkward. But if you tell them, just keep your hand kind of right in front of it should end up right in the middle of your chest, and just follow along. You don't want any line going through the rod, one way or the other. Just like that. Got it. Okay, double haul, teach it. But with this thing, you can do one at a time, and you can think about it.
once I get to where I can do, several of them in a row, then I might just try and then I'm gonna get all screwed up, and then I just go back and start over. And pretty soon, you get it, and you can kind of bring the rod up a little higher, and the next thing you know, you're double hauling. That is by far the fastest way I know. Everybody thinks the haul is just to make things go faster, but I use it more for, if I was casting this distance without a haul, I got to do all the work with my right arm. My left is just taking a vacation. But if I was to add a little bit of haul here, the right hand does 15% less, and the loops get better because I got better control of the rod tip because my casting arc is going to be narrower. It just makes control easier. The thing that messes people up most beyond the timing thing is they have it in their head that the haul is something's got to be really hard and fast. So it's just a matter of building up. And long hauls, you read stuff about short hauls, but short hauls are not what you want to do. Long and smooth, just like the rod stroke. If the rod stroke is long and smooth, why would you want to accelerate the line with the other hand differently? Because both hands are accelerating the line at the same time. So now I'm all set up, and if I want to do a roll cast now, I can do a real nice roll cast. But if you don't have an anchor out there, the line just slips on the grass. You got to have the friction of the water. If you don't, you have to do something, and this is what I do. But you can just put a rock on it, that works fine. But then the routine is, make a good roll cast. You make the biggest D-loop you can, because the more line you have behind you and the less in front of you, the easier the cast is to make. So a lot of people will just, bring this back to about here, and then they intend to make the roll cast. And it's much harder than if I actually have more back here, because all this line up here is just trouble. The stuff back here is your friend, this stuff is not. So more here, less there. Make a big D-loop. Then you have to bring the rod back to what I call the start position, which for normal distance roll casts is going to be about 1 o'clock, or is that 11 o'clock? Wind's blowing the wrong way. And then you're going to stroke the rod hard down to 10 o'clock, and you make a beautiful roll cast. And the way you know it's a beautiful roll cast is you watch the top part of the loop, and if it's no higher than your eyes, you've done it right, and it will lay out nice and straight. What most people do wrong is they make the D-loop, and they say, okay, we're ready to go. See how high that was? You can see it didn't even... So where you start applying the power is the key to making a good roll cast. If you start from here, look at the direction the rod tip has to go. That means the line has to go there. It's the same mechanics as for an overhead cast. So bring it up to here. Now the rod, if it bends a little bit, the rod tip is going to go forward and down, and that's where the line's going to go. And there it is, forward and down. The easiest way to teach a reach cast is this, and just stay where you are. What most, especially people that fish in windy places like we do, a lot of the reach casts are done like this. Timing has to be perfect. It's a difficult thing, but it gets the line low right away, and and it works. But it's really hard to teach somebody to go down and across real fast. So to teach them, at least to get them started with it, what I like to do is say, just make your normal cast, and then when you stop on your delivery, then you're just going to leave the rod tip nice and high, and you're going to move it directly, 90 degrees, either whichever direction you want. Here it comes, so nice and high, and then straight over, rather than trying to do that down thing, because the timing is critical. With a lot of practice, it's easy to do. If you're talking about people who don't reach now, it's really hard. So it's stop there and then just straight over, that way or this way. The higher they leave the rod, the longer they have to make this happen. It really can be a fairly lazy, gentle thing. It's that. Because if they do it really fast, of course they pull the whole line back and it's done. So stop and then just straight over.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Warriors in Quiet Waters Virtual Fishing. Happy fishing!